Hello, my name is Leonard Sultana. I'm the editor-in-chief of theconventioncollective.com, and it's my pleasure and privilege to welcome you to this special presentation as part of the Lakes International Comic Art Festival live. Initially launched by Carole and Julie Tait of the festival at Lakes 2018 and run over the last year and a half, Breakthrough is an initiative created in partnership with noted writer-editor Tim Pilcher that aimed to provide underrepresented creative talent the tools and the means to express themselves through the medium of comics, while also giving a chance to open the door into a career in the industry. The festival, in conjunction with partners such as Arts Council England, Wellcome Trust Fellowship, Soaring Penguin Press and Quarto Books, selected 4 amazing talents, each with a unique voice, to take part in mentoring sessions from some of comics' leading lights and one-to-one guidance from people in the industry with the goal of shaping their stories. This ultimately came together in the form of an anthology book, Our Time, stories that talk about important issues affecting Britain today, such as disability, climate awareness, Black Lives Matter and Brexit. And it's fantastic to see Our Time seeing the light of day, published physically and also available online as of this weekend of Lakes International Comic Art Festival Live. I'm lucky today to be joined by the 4 incredible talents selected to be part of Breakthrough. Hannah Hodgson, the writer of Assumptions, a look at people's perceptions of those with disabilities based on Hannah's own personal experiences. Abbigayle Birchum, the writer-artist of Worry and Vought, a fantastical eco-fantasy story which draws on the rise of the Extinction Rebellion movement. Christie, the writer-artist of Black Window, a look at life in Britain from the perspective of people of colour, drawing on Danny's own personal experiences, including his mother's battle with mental health issues and their own clashes with the police and authorities. And Michael Lightfoot, the writer-artist of Looking for Love in Brexit Britain, a parody of 1950s romance comics which examines how relationships remain fraught after the divisive referendum of 2016. Michael also serves double duty in the anthology as the artist of Hannah's Assumptions. We're also joined by Breakthrough editor Tim Pilcher to talk about the origins of the project and what it was like to be able to work with and showcase these amazing talents. So, Tim, how long has it been from initial concept to selection to publication?
God, well, it's going almost 2 years ago now, really. It's quite interesting. Actually, a little bit over. It's funny how it was done. I was actually approached by Julie Carole Tait from the Lakes Arts Comics Festival. And, there's an international bit in there, I should have forgotten. And I'd been exhibiting there pretty much from the second show, and we'd built up a rapport and everything. They knew the sort of stuff I'd done in the past. I've done lots of anthology books using new creators, and they approached me and asked, would you be interested in developing this Breakthrough initiative, which was completely designed to look for new talent around the UK and help develop and nurture that talent to find a new generation of comic creators. Most importantly, comic creators who aren't the sort of people that necessarily always create comics, that don't have a voice within comics. So it was all about kind of diversity right from the start. So we were looking for whether it's people from the BAME community or from disabled or special needs, or people who live in the countryside, because a lot of comics are produced by people that live in kind of cities and, you know, sort of quite metropolitan and art related. So we wanted to get people from all over the country. And so we put out this call. We launched it in the Lakes in 2018, and it was always going to be an 18-month long project. So from start to finish, I guess it's just been about 2 years, really.
A thread to the creators that you chose and the stories that you selected is that they touch on very contemporary themes and issues. Was that a necessity for submission or a happy accident in the final selections?
It's really interesting. Whenever you try and do anything really topically and, sort of right on the sort of the zeitgeist, often it doesn't work because, comics is a slow game. You can get things turned around very quickly, but we had a long training process within this as well. So there was no way that we could say in 18 months whether these were going to be relevant in a year and a half's time. What was really fascinating, though, was everyone had chosen the subjects that they wanted to talk about. And last year in 2019, the Extinction Rebellion thing was very big. It was hitting the streets and everything. And then sort of COVID came along and all of these sorts of things that we were discussing. So there's sort of fell by the wayside a bit. And then things like the Black Lives Matter movement sort of regained resurgence. And so Danny Christie's story, which is very much about racism and growing up and being black in Britain and how that affects with mental health issues, his story suddenly came up to the fore. So we've seen the kind of news agenda sort of piggybacking a bit. And now with Abbigayle Birchum's story, which is a little fantasy story about as an allegory for Extinction Rebellion, we're now seeing Extinction Rebellion coming back into the news agenda. So these things are kind of like moved around and developed over that time. And that's been really interesting to watch because they've picked their story, they picked what the subject they wanted to talk to, and we've seen how the news media has kind of come in and out of that almost. So actually, they are all still, I think, completely relevant to what's happening now in the media as they were sort of, a year and a half ago, if not more so. Again, I put in the afterward, the elephant in the room, of course, is COVID, because I don't think there was anyone last year was had a magic crystal ball and was going to be able to see what was going to happen. So there isn't anything about the coronavirus or anything on that side, simply because by January, February, people were already committed to doing the artwork and doing the stories, and that would have been too big a change to come around. But I guess in some ways, you could say that Hannah Hodgson's story about the assumptions that people make about disabled people. She is a disabled person in a wheelchair, and she is having to self-isolate. So in some ways, that kind of comes back into that sort of idea of disability, and the issues that are caused by COVID. So it still stays really incredibly fresh. And I think the nice thing about this writing is they're a snapshot, I think, of British culture and society as it is right now, and has been maybe for the last couple of years. So I think it will maintain its relevance for a long time to come.
Why these four creatives? What made them stand out from all the rest?
Well, I think the first and foremost, the sense of enthusiasm and love of comics. I think that was the key thing, because, as I said, comics aren't a quick fix. They take a while, and you have to be in it for the long haul. So I think we wanted people that weren't going to be kind of flighty and just kind of zip in and get bored and then clear off again. We wanted people who were actually going to put some time and effort into this and some dedication, and they all came across as very dedicated and keen to do the work.
The stories that have been selected range from incredibly autobiographical to abstract and fantastical in nature. But what would you say was your role in shaping those final stories as an editor?
Well, I mean, from the start, I didn't really want it to be all autobiographical stories in that sense, not directly, because I would have thought it gets a bit samey after a while, and I wanted sort of creators to kind of push themselves a little bit by talking about stuff in a way that pushed their creativity and made them think slightly differently. So with Abbigayle, she went for a whole fantasy thing because that's what she's really into, and that was a nice allegory to get away from it being sort of too polemic and too obviously political, although those elements are obviously in there. There's sort of famous politicians kind of hidden as the characters within the strip. And again, with Michael Lightfoot's Looking for Love in Brexit Britain, on the surface, obviously, you go immediately, okay, this is a Brexit Britain sort of thing. But what he started doing was looking at 1950s romance comics and those sorts of things, and looking at the kind of hyperbolic kind of language that's used in there, and this kind of highly charged, emotive sort of storytelling that you see in the kind of the classic sort of Kirby and Simon sort of romance comics from the 1950s. So he kind of took that element and adapted that into a modern context, and used that sort of language and that storytelling in a modern context.
So let's talk about the mentoring aspect of the project. How did those sessions develop? Who did you get involved, and how eager were they in participating?
Yeah, well, sort of over the 18-month period, we had 3 workshop weekends where we all met up in different parts of the country in a hotel. We had a working room, and it was very much a chance to get everyone together, for them to kind of bounce ideas off of each other initially, and just to kind of, you know, get that sense of camaraderie and as a team working. And we had sort of guest speakers come along. So for the first one, it was just the launch, and we went through and we discussed ideas, we discussed what they wanted to achieve and how we could help them achieve that. And then they would go away, and I would be constantly in touch with them, and we'd talk back and forth via sort of various different ways, whether it's Skype or sort of email or things like that. And they would send me various bits and pieces. Then on the second one, we were lucky we had Dave Gibbons came along and talked about his experiences of working in comics, how he personally works in comics, and gave feedback on the work they'd done between the first workshop and the second one. And on the third one, we had Charlie Adlard. So we had 2 of the comics laureates come along and give their advice. And Charlie Adlard's the artist of The Walking Dead. And of course, the project had moved on a lot more since then. So he could then look at what they'd done up to that point, and again, giving them some hints and tips and advice on how he would have approached any of the problems that they were experiencing, and just kind of keep them getting on, really. So it was great that they could have sort of like some also advice, not only from me, but for some of the kind of the giants within the industry.
So when did you first hear about the Breakthrough Project?
I first heard about Breakthrough from Bobby Joseph. He is a comic writer, and he did a writing course in City Lit in London, I believe. I think he's still doing it. But that's how I met him. And he has been a huge, huge encouragement of just putting myself out there, getting my writing out there, and getting my work out there. And one day he emails me and says, hey, there's this festival that I do talks at. I heard they're doing a competition. Do you want to enter it? I think you should. I was a little bit hesitant to begin with, but he basically said, you need to enter it. Trust me, it's going to be worth doing it if you get through. And here I am.
I love comics, but I've always grew up in a place where, you know, in a world where there wasn't that much like black characters. That there was loads of black characters. Like you can talk about Spawn, you can talk about Blade, you can talk about all these different characters, but like specifically written like in a British way, like by a black British person, like it's like representation, isn't it? So I bought that book, and yeah, we started talking, but I've never met him in person, but we started talking online a lot, and he's quite encouraging of what I was doing, because I just found it amazing that like I was trying to make like the first kind of yardy looking superhero, but he'd already kind of done it in his own way. So it showed that there was definitely something out there that wanted that to happen. But yeah, he was the one who sent me the link to apply for the competition. He put me onto it, and then I applied. I sent some of my work, and I started talking to Carole, and then I went to the first day, and that's how it went. That's how I got involved in that. That's how I found out. It was sent to me by a friend.
So it was about a year or so ago. And I found it on Facebook. One of my friends had shared it and said, this is really cool things happening. And at first I wasn't thinking about applying, but then I started to get some ideas about things that I could write about, and actually I wanted to expand what I write and how I write. So I applied and got in. So it was great.
The Breakthrough project, I think it might have been with socially, actually, through Tim, because we both live in Brighton, and I think it might have been at the Cartoon County Cartoonist Club. I remember him talking about it, and I wasn't sure that it would be something that I could apply for, actually. But what actually happened was he said to me very shortly before the deadline, actually, he said, why don't you apply? And I did, and they accepted me, and I was delighted.
Whatever the style of the stories told, all of the stories in the book come from a very personal place. You could say that's the very definition of Breakthrough. How much of an editorial guiding hand did you get? What notes did you get back about your story, and how do you feel that they shaped your story for the better?
I went into the competition confident anyway, because like I said, I've already made a book of my own without any opportunity to help me. Like, my book's self-published and stuff. I've just done it, so I've got the experience in it, but I don't have the industry experience. And what this advertised to me was that I would be working with professionals that would show me how it's really done on an industry level. Like, this book that I made took me 3 years to do. If I did it the way that they've showed me how to do, would have took me a couple of months if I was really focused. But you know, like what we did do, what was good is that we had David Gibbons, and we had other people come and give their input, you know, people with valuable years worth of experience and knowledge, and they were supportive. So like, even the advice they gave, I never really got that much advice to say that I had to change much. It was very small things, because I already had a vision of what I wanted to do.
Yeah, so I think one of the better things about the course is the fact that we were kind of allowed free roaming. We were allowed to come up with our ideas as long as it fit the theme, and then just go mad with it. Tim himself was really, really helpful. It's not like there was a tug of war for kind of what the final result would be. It was more that they wanted to help me make it the best that it can be, rather than kind of controlling what it was.
I mean, getting to actually sit down with Dave Gibbons and go over thumbnails was a dream come true. In fact, you might be able to see I've got on my wall there a book of his, largely comprised of his thumbnails. So to actually sit down with him and go over those was tremendous. And in the case of that one, that with Hannah's story, actually, when I discussed that with Dave, he was sort of able to suggest a shift in camera angles, which really helped bring the story together.
Yeah, he was absolutely incredible. He really got my story and was a driving force for change within it, but also very, very respectful of what we had worked on, that it was very personal, but also he was very instrumental in keeping the poetry in there, because we weren't sure if that would work. And he helped us with the layout of it and the telling of it. And yeah, it was really, it was just incredible. It didn't quite feel real that day. Having such a legend help you with your little story, it was amazing. And then Tim, he's also been fabulous with just really helpful as much time as we have needed. Whenever we've needed it, he's kind of dropped what he's been doing and got back to us. And the weekends themselves they were really information dense, but we also got to have a lot of fun with it, which I'm really grateful for.
I think one of the most common things that I kind of got was my art style is very much an homage to animation, like current cartoons on TV. And that's something that I did want to kind of show off a bit. So I'm kind of glad that came across. With all of the movements and things, I did want to make it feel like something that you'd sit down on a Saturday afternoon and you'd watch with your family, or maybe just watch by yourself and just enjoy it.
Yeah, there were times where basically the main thing that I took away from it was pacing, because, you know, it's a rhythm. So when people can see the images and put the words to it, like somebody who understands comics or understands just writing in general, you get to be able to feel the situation in the moment. So I concentrated on what they were teaching me about pacing, because my story is one that has action, not like movie star action, but, you know, it's got action in it, but it's actually like it's a adaptation of me going to visit my mother in a mental health place and trying to get her mood and her mannerisms across the way that I remember them. So I think, you know, at the start, Tim was kind of trying to see if I could maybe pace it a little faster. But I think as he understood that this is actually an experience that I'm trying to capture in the comic book form more than actually trying to make a comic book, I think that he started to understand that, you know, there are parts in my story that is quite slow, like the parts where I'm in the room with her, and because that's how it was for me. So, you know, now I think it works well, because then when we get into the flashbacks and the memories and all of these things, you know, it is quite fast paced and you get to see them, you get to go into the characters' minds, but it's an intimate and it's a very strange situation to be in, like being in a mental health clinic, meeting your mom. Your mom doesn't want you to be there. You don't really want to be there, but you're trying to support your mom. Your mom's trying to be the best that she can be.
These are not passive stories by any stretch of the imagination. They're all designed to elicit a very visceral response in the reader. Reading them back and finally seeing them realised in this form, how has the story and your own reaction to it changed from your original concept?
Well, in the case of my story, Looking for Love in Brexit Britain, I did have quite a clear vision of it, and it I mean ultimately I can't. The sad thing about making things like this is ultimately you can't ever look at it objectively yourself as to how well it works as a story or not. That's for other people to say, or even if it's interesting or not, that's for other people to say. But I did more or less illustrate the thing that I saw in my head initially, and so it didn't really change. However, things do change along the way, and I mean, it's difficult to remember. I mean, it does go through an awful lot. There's a huge amount of process that goes on before you actually get to drawing it and then inking it. So it's very difficult to summarize. But the last page actually changed. Right, I think at the penciling stage. Because for me, there's lots of things that change along the way, and you have a sense in your gut that things are about right. However, the last page always bugged me, and it actually went through quite a lot of drafts. I mean, I would intermittently sort of revisit it and try to draft it one way or the other throughout. And then, as so often happens with these things, it's a funny business that you only partially consciously control. Suddenly the last page just sort of came to me out of the blue, and I sketched it out and looked at it a couple of days later to sort of, you know, ascertain that I wasn't just sort of having a daft idea. And I got that sense in my gut. No, I know how this ends now, and that seemed to work. So yeah.
So initially, Warrior Vault was supposed to just be kind of a retelling of what happened with Extinction Rebellion back in May 2019. But as I started writing the script and really getting to know these characters, I started seeing parts of myself in all of them. but mainly it was to do with worry and the fact that I stress so much. Like it's one of my worst flaws is that I'm always kind of on edge, stressing about something. There's always something to worry about. But it's something that both I am learning still and that Worry learns in the comic, that sometimes that can only do so much. Sometimes you actually have to physically do something about it because that's the only reason it's ever going to change. And I really wanted to channel that, and I hope it's come across in the comic.
Hannah, what made you decide on an autobiographical story?
I can't really remember. I think pretty quickly, just with conversations I'd been having with Tim, we decided that it would be more powerful if I wanted to, if I would put my face to these stories. And by doing so, I hope it shows where we're at as a society. You know, it's not the disability isn't the issue, is my what I hope the takeaway will be. It's kind of the attitude surrounding my disability, and it, you know, it's outside forces that kind of force me into being the victim-y type of thing. And it's a very, I know I keep on saying this, but it's so strange to be living it and also to see it on the page. But I hope that it will be a good educational piece.
Did the writing of the story act as a kind of cathartic process for you? Was that the intention starting out?
I think I have definitely expanded what I've been writing with my poetry since Breakthrough. I think I was in a very damaged and I was in a tight spot, really. I was on the verge of huge depression, which I've been going through recently, and it kind of it's been very cathartic in that I have managed to use poetry and this alongside my therapy with the therapist. So it has been a great way of saying this is how I'm feeling, but it also being art, which I think, I've always said that writing has been my therapy. And while that hasn't been the healthiest thing, it's kind of been a me avoiding stuff thing. It has definitely helped, and now I read things that I was writing and I understand where that was coming from, and the impact that was having on me at that time. It's been a great way of separating horrendous things that have happened into a piece of art rather than that occupying my mind all of the time, because it has been quite traumatic. It's been a wonderful way of sort of making it into something else, making it other people's in a way, and going, it's art, it's not part of me. It's been a real process of learning.
The breakthrough thing basically came around just at the right moment when I was still processing my mother passing. So, and I'm still processing it now, but it was a lot more intense at the time when it first started. So, like when I was thinking of an idea, when they gave me the brief and told me what the idea was, what ideas I had to come up with, it was no brainer. I'm gonna tell my mom's story, and and I wanted to commemorate my mother. I mean, she has an experience as a person, as a black person, born and raised in this country, but you know, she was a Rasta as well, and she'd passed, and I wanted to commemorate her in some way. But I knew my mum she was diagnosed with mental health stuff, and while she was alive, I was trying to support her with that, and I tried to encourage her to write something about her life. I encouraged her to be creative again and write something about life, but she never lived long enough to get the chance to do that. So I think this is a good way for me to kind of, you know, try and do that for her, but also make sure that, you know, her story doesn't go untold, even if it's just a shorthand version.
Michael, what made you decide on a first-person perspective story?
I mean, I think it's more intimate, isn't it? It's likely to be more intimate, and it's also something. It's actually a strength of comics. I mean, people think that first person works especially well in novels, and obviously it does work well in novels. But I mean, one of the differences between novels and comics is I mean, the reader kind of completes the work with a novel in that they visualize what they're reading, whereas with the comic you're able to sort of do the visualizing for the reader, and yet you're also the comics medium does support more first person narration than film does. For example, it generally doesn't seem to work too well in film, and a lot of directors avoid it. You know, you can do it, but it just doesn't seem to work too well, certainly not to do too much of it, whereas the comic medium does support that. So I tried to sort of see how far I could go with giving you internal dialogue. Again, I can't say ultimately how well it works. It's a balancing act, but it is something that you can do. You know, can work in comics. So I wanted to exploit that, and you know, I wanted to make the thing as intimate as I could. I think my one, I had a pretty clear, almost a sort of fever dream that was quite clear, that I sort of knew what I wanted to do, and it largely wrote itself actually, which is lucky. Doesn't always happen.
Abbigayle, Worry and Vought is most certainly the story with the most fantastical backdrop, even though it comes from a very real-world place. What was the challenge of creating a new fantasy realm and transposing your take of Extinction Rebellion onto it?
Yeah, the challenge of doing that was actually being able to kind of portray it properly, because I was constantly worried about, is it going to be too subtle, or is it going to be too heavy-handed? Is it going to come off a bit preachy? Is it going to come off a bit too subtle and people won't get the message? I wanted there to be kind of a clear link towards what's going on at the moment, or what was going on at that point, because that was around May 2019 when the Extinction Rebellion did all of those protests, which completely put London into a standstill, and I'd never seen that before. So that was on my mind, and I was really thinking about it. I was thinking, this is so strange and incredible, and I feel really inspired by that. So I'd like to try and shape it that way. So taking the events of what happened in London and moving it to the very base core idea of what it was people standing up for the world around them, and against people who want to put that at risk. And then once I'd stripped all of the realism that I could off of that, it was just kind of applying all the fantasy to it.
Yeah.
So it's like putting it down to like its very bare bones and then bringing it back up.
Worry and Vought is also arguably the most optimistic out of the four. Was that the conscious decision from yourself from the start, or was that something that came along in the evolution of the story?
Ongoing.
Yeah, I mean, environmentalism as a whole, that's exactly what it is. Like, the protest ended and there was some changes made and it got people's attention, but that's not going to end pollution. It's not going to magically stop things from going extinct. It is an ongoing problem, and it's something that we need to fight for constantly. And whilst that can be quite tiring, it's really, really important to celebrate the little victories. Like, just personally, I'm so over pessimistic stories about struggles and we won this fight, but at what cost? And it's so depressing. I it's so important to remember that the reason why we're doing these things and fighting through these storms is the sunny day at the end, so to speak. We want to get there and we want to make things better, and we have to keep thinking of that to keep pushing forward. And it's okay to look forward to that, you know, rather than just be miserable about everything.
That makes sense. What's been your thoughts on the Breakthrough project now that it's nearing publication?
Well, Breakthrough's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. I mean, I mean that very seriously, because it's been an ambition of mine for several years to make a graphic novel, and I've been saying, possibly cheekily, I don't know that this is a graphic novella, which I think you could say it is. So it's a significant step towards being able to make a graphic novel or the graphic novellas. And if I am able to do that, it will be entirely thanks to this program, to the Breakthrough program.
Yeah, it's been excitement. Everybody I've told has been really, really excited to see the upshot of it, and I think it's all come together beautifully. The book is going to be a lovely thing to hold. The work is absolutely stunning. The artists are just incredible. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time. It really is, and we've all worked really hard, and we're going to have a physical book to hold at the end of it. So yeah, it's been a really amazing thing, especially with working with LICAF. I went to LICAF, I've been many years, to the LICAF festival, so to be affiliated with them and to have such brilliant contact with them. Carol is incredible. Yeah, it's been it's made me realize what more I could do in my career in the future, which is very exciting.
And what's been the reaction from friends and family to finally seeing your story in its final format?
I don't know yet.
Yeah, haven't they seen it?
Nah. Well, like, I've shared little previews on my social media and stuff. Like maybe when I've completed a few pages, I've, did the screen recording on my phone and put it on Instagram and stuff. Like people are excited because I've got my other book already, and quite a few people have bought that, and people I got the impression that some people are like watching me progress, and there's a slight anticipation. I haven't got a huge following, but I know that there's some people that are looking forward to seeing it, especially when it comes out and it's being shown around, and I can really promote it. But other than that, I don't know, because it is quite personal and it is quite relevant and it is quite hard hitting. I think that if people really read it, I think that it would have a different kind of reaction. But I'm optimistic anyway. I'm trying not to like because it's not just me doing it. Like I'm trying not to like jump the gun too much. So I haven't revealed everything. I mean, my sister knows about it, my brother knows about it, which are my mother's children as well. And but nobody's really told me what they think yet. I think they're just waiting to see how it turns out. You know what I mean?
I think weirdly enough, they're less surprised than I am. It all still feels like this isn't really happening to me. Like maybe this was meant for someone else and there was a mix-up. But my friends and family have always it's not really a big deal to them because they knew I was going to do it. They expected this to happen eventually, and whenever they say that I'm like they're so proud of me, or like they knew this was going to happen, it grounds the whole situation for me, and I don't think I could be doing half of the things that I do without them. And I'm really, really grateful for all of the encouraging people I have in my life.
Well, off the back of this, I've actually written a children's picture book, and I've got a meeting with the publisher, which is very exciting. And I would like to write a full-length version of my story. I think in the future, at some time, I've got to live a bit more and get more comfortable within my own skin, and then going forward, I think I would love to continue working in this medium, because it's something so special. It really captures the experience unlike anything I've ever worked with before, which is fabulous.
Yeah, Breakthrough is definitely going to be a springboard for the future, I think. I'd love to continue more of what I'm doing with the illustrations collective that I've got, making my own comics, just doing a lot of the little things that I do. But I'd love to be able to work in comics full time. That is a huge, huge thing, but quite personal to me. And it's going to be hard to achieve, getting all that work constantly. But I would love to either go into working on inking or colouring or maybe even penciling, until I feel like I have my own story that I really, really want to commit all my time with. And then once I've done that, I can send it to publishers and see how it goes. I mean, it's basically just made me that I do know that I want it's made it so I know that I want a career in comics. I've never been more sure of anything.
Excellent.
Well, I hope that I can do it. And it really depends how people respond to this, or even if they do, if they're interested. That's not for me to say. But if there is enough interest so that I can move forward, then I would be delighted.
It's a hell of a platform. It's a hell of a platform to go from.
Yeah, but you've also got to just consider the if you've got to have, quite a lot of people have got to be interested in order to move forward. They've got to be interested in your work, so that just remains to be seen. I don't know.
Fair enough.
May I ask, did you enjoy it? Would you have bought it?
I did.
I can kind of remember back to the first workshop when the theme got revealed of it being about our lives in London and our own experiences. And the entire time we were going through the brief, I was thinking, how can I turn this into some way that I can draw like fantastical things? Because I love it. It's how I express myself. That is my reality in a sense.